Right, if we're ready, we'll come on to the first statement. Grenfell Tower Inquiry Annual Report, and I call the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by acknowledging the presence of survivors and relatives of those who died at Grenfell with us here in the galleries today. They have the deepest sympathies of the whole House and our most profound respect. The fire at Grenfell Tower that claimed 72 innocent lives was a terrible moment in British history. We will not forget what happened that night. We must make sure that nothing like it can ever happen again. The government accepted all the Grenfell Tower inquiry's findings and committed to implementing all 58 recommendations. Everyone deserves a safe, decent home. This requires a new culture of transparency and accountability. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, today I can report that we are on target to complete 70% of the inquiry's recommendations by the end of the current year. Since the inquiry published its final report, we've completed 10 recommendations from Phase 2 and 2 outstanding Phase 1 recommendations. Today, I will set out the progress we've made on reforming the construction industry, strengthening fire and rescue services, and improving support for vulnerable people. We will complete all the remaining recommendations during this Parliament. We're also publishing the Construction Products Reform White Paper, building on the proposals we set out in December for a new single construction regulator. Our work goes beyond the specific inquiry recommendations because we are determined to secure lasting change across the whole system. Last summer, we made sure the Building Safety Regulator had the leadership it needs to do its job well. Lord Rowe reformed the London Fire Brigade and is bringing the same determination to making the BSR work. Over time, the BSR will evolve into the regulator the inquiry recommended. We're consulting on that today. We will replace fragmented regulation with clear accountability. Everyone will understand their role and the standards that are expected of them. We have already made changes to get our own house in order. Fire policy now sits within my department, ensuring that oversight of housing, building safety and fire is properly joined up within government. The Construction Products Reform White Paper sets out ambitious plans to modernise the rules. We will make sure products are safe and ensure everyone meets their responsibilities. These reforms will mean sensible regulation, fit for the future and confidence in the safety of our homes. We will make sure that people working in construction have the skills they need. We support the building professions and there will be rigorous expectations for competence and for ethics. We've also published a formal statement setting out the path to proper professional regulation of fire engineering. One of the clearest lessons from the inquiry was the need for better fire and rescue services. I am grateful to the National Fire Chiefs Council and the London Fire Brigade for their work on improving fire and rescue standards. A new National College of Fire and Rescue will ensure these improvements continue. Protecting people means making sure those most at risk are never left behind. New regulations requiring emergency evacuation plans for high-rise buildings will come into force on the 6th of April. These will mean vulnerable people have a plan for safe evacuation in the event of a fire. Making sure everyone has a safe home also means tackling wider problems in social housing. Grenfell shone a light on so many wrongs that we are now putting right. Through AWAB's law, landlords must make urgent repairs where there are serious threats to health. People have more power to hold landlords to account, and we're giving them better access to information so they can get more involvement in how their homes are managed. Speeding up remediation is one of my highest priorities. Work to remove and replace unsafe ACM cladding, the same type that was on Grenfell Tower, has finished on 91% of high-rise residential and public buildings, with work on most of the rest now well underway. We're working with developers, freeholders and local authorities to remove other types of unsafe cladding as quickly as possible, monitoring thousands of high-rise residential buildings to make sure they are making progress. We've also strengthened local resilience and emergency preparations. All 5 Local Resilience Forum trailblazers have been funded and the 4 Chief Resilience Officers have been appointed. We're also setting up a national system for local areas to learn from each other, so the lessons of Grenfell lead to lasting improvements in crisis response. It's only right that we are transparent in how we address the Grenfell Tower inquiry's carefully considered recommendations. We will continue to inform Parliament each quarter about progress with these recommendations. Alongside this statement, I'm publishing our annual report on gov.uk. We will continue with these reports until every recommendation is complete. The Government's new public dashboards for inquiry recommendations will continue to be updated quarterly. Throughout this work, the Government has acted on the inquiry's findings to address the culture that allowed failure to happen. Yet we recognise that for many, something is still missing. For the bereaved and survivors and the wider Grenfell community, the need for justice is deeply felt, including decisions on criminal charges. The Metropolitan Police investigation, independent of government, is one of the largest and most complex in the force's history. But I know the slow progress is painful for those who have already waited too long for the justice they deserve. Nothing can erase the grief suffered by the Grenfell community. Their loss, strength and determination to change things for the better guide all that we do. Failures of government under successive administrations made this tragedy possible. This brings an enduring duty to honour the memory of the 72 men, women and children who lost their lives. As part of that duty, I can inform the House that we are introducing legislation to provide the spending authority required to support the Memorial Commission and the community in building and maintaining a lasting and dignified memorial. I know there is much still we need to do, but there has been real progress. The foundations for lasting change are in place. A reformed regulatory system, empowered residents, accountable landlords, stronger professions and greater transparency. Our objective is clear and we remain true to it. Never again. Never again should people go to bed unsure that their home is safe. Never again should public institutions fail in their duty to protect. And never again should the voices of residents be ignored. The actions we are taking honour those who died at Grenfell, support those who survived, and serve our shared obligation to make every home a place of safety, dignity and trust. And in that spirit, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Minister, Paul Holmes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement, and can I join him in welcoming survivors from Grenfell with us today. Madam Deputy Speaker, the events which took place on the 14th of June in 2017 was an avoidable national tragedy that should not have robbed 72 people of their lives. This cannot ever be repeated. It is right that, in consultation with the survivors, the bereaved and those directly impacted, a fitting and lasting memorial is in place to remember the 72 lives that were lost that day and the wider Grenfell community. And we welcome the new legislation that the Secretary of State has announced this afternoon. It is right that we remember the victims, and I thank the Secretary of State for giving us the opportunity to do this while he updates the House. The victims must be at the heart of how we remember Grenfell, and the government must work with them in a sensitive manner as humanly possible. We will support and scrutinise how they proceed with a memorial to ensure that victims are at the heart of what is decided. We believe that this should be cross-party, as this goes beyond party politics, and it is simply the right thing to do. Madam Deputy Speaker, the inquiry's findings, decades of systematic failure, dishonesty and negligence, are a damning indictment of successive governments, regulators and industry. The government's response last year, with acceptance of all 58 recommendations, is a step forward, and we welcome the commitment to action. I am glad to hear today that a few of these recommendations have already taken place. The creation of a single construction regulator, the appointment of a chief construction advisor, and the consolidation of fire safety functions under one department are long overdue reforms. And while we welcome the formulation of a single construction regulator, can the Secretary of State confidently state that he believes that this will be more effective and help safely build the homes we need? And can he confirm that we will not be left with the potential delays that we've seen under the building safety regulator? Madam Deputy Speaker, in government we took decisive action to initiate this public inquiry immediately after the tragedy to learn the lessons and prevent it from ever happening again. We strengthened the regulatory regime and implemented the inquiry's recommendations following the report from the first phase. It was welcome that this government also accepted the recommendations. Will the Secretary of State publish a detailed plan on how all of these recommendations are being implemented and the status of these? The Secretary of State updated us that 91% of high-rise residential and public buildings has had cladding removed. Will he update us with a roadmap of when the rest will be completed? Madam Deputy Speaker, all building owners must step up, do the right thing and fix their buildings without delay or face the consequences of their inaction. Those who intentionally cut corners on building safety must be held to account. The Metropolitan Police and CPS should continue to pursue criminal charges against the small number of developers and contractors who knowingly and fraudulently cut corners on building safety for greed and financial gain. The Secretary of State has promised to complete all the remaining recommendations during this Parliament. Will he lay out key dates for when key parts will be achieved? And will he update us on what stage he is at with the Grenfell site itself and future plans for it, and how he is working with the victims' families to support them on this? Madam Deputy Speaker, those who profited from cutting corners who were criminally negligent must face consequences, not just fines, but criminal charges where evidence allows. We will support and scrutinise the support for victims and their families that the government are putting forward to ensure that we get this right. And I know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Secretary of State and the Building Safety Minister want to get this right. Madam Deputy Speaker, Grenfell must be a watershed, a legacy of safety, transparency and respect for every resident. I make clear this side of the House's commitment to work with the Secretary of State and the Government on a cross-party basis to meet that promise.
Hear, hear. Secretary of State.
Thank you. Can I thank him for his comments and welcome the tone that he's adopted in this. I think it's quite right that we should all be working cross-party on this, both to speed up the outcomes that we're all looking for, but by working together in a way that shows respect to the families and to those who've lost their lives in this tragedy. He asked about the single construction regulator. The BSR became standalone from the HSE on the 26th of January, and work is progressing to bring into the BSR all the other aspects that will allow it to function in due course as the single construction regulator, which the inquiry identified as such an important part of fixing the building safety system. And Lord Rowe is overseeing rapid improvement in the performance of the BSR, even as we speak. Remediation, he asked about. It's welcome, of course, that 91% of high-rise residential public buildings with unsafe ACM have now been remediated, but we recognise there's further to go, and there are further acceleration plans available. And I'll be happy to write to him if he would like to have access to that information. Similarly, he asked about key dates in implementing further recommendations. We will continue to publish quarterly reports so that the whole House could scrutinise progress that the government is making with these recommendations. And my honourable friend, the Minister, and I are meeting regularly with families and affected groups to make sure that we are hearing directly their concerns and can feed that straight into the system.
Call the Kensington Bayswater MP Joe Powell. Take your time.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as we approach the 9th anniversary of the Grenfell tragedy, bereaved survivors in the community are still rightly advocating for truth, justice and change on behalf of the 72 people who lost their lives in an entirely preventable fire. And I pay tribute to all of those who have joined us again today and those who are watching this statement. I know the whole House will agree with the Secretary of State that criminal accountability cannot come soon enough. But in the meantime, I welcome this annual report and the progress being made in many areas, from building safety to social housing management. We know that too often lessons have not been learned from public inquiries, and implementation of recommendations has not been transparent and accountable. So I would also welcome an update from the Minister on the proposal for an oversight mechanism to ensure recommendations are actually implemented. And when it comes to the performance of Kensington and Chelsea Council, many residents are highly sceptical about this progress. A seriously failing housing department, according to the independent regulator, the third worst record on complaints, according to the local government ombudsman, and on the Lancaster West estate itself, uncertainty over the budget for completing the promised works. So can I also ask the Secretary of State for his assurance that RBKC will remain under close central government scrutiny and that he will do all he can to broker a solution so that residents on Lancaster West, the ones who least deserve to be suffering, don't wait years more for their own safe and healthy homes.
Secretary of State.
Well, can I thank him for his question, but also congratulate him for being such a powerful voice for his constituents and all those who have suffered and died as a result of the tragedy at Grenfell Tower. He has rightly earned respect from members across the House for the dignified way in which he's carried out his role as a representative for the community. The government is very keen to make sure that we learn the lessons and are implementing the report, so we will continue to publish quarterly reports to update the whole House and indeed members of the public on the progress that we're making. And work is continuing across government, including my department, on setting up a national oversight mechanism to make sure that the recommendations of this and indeed other inquiries do not just sit on shelves but get implemented and inform improvement in the way that we deliver public services, including in this important case, fire safety. He refers to the Lancaster West estate, which I've had the opportunity to visit with him. The government has made £25 million available to allow work to continue on upgrading and improving the estate. He'll be aware that we have concerns about the Council's delivery capacity and cost control, and I'm in contact with the leader of the Council about those concerns in the hope and expectation that we can address them together. But for all of us, it will be the residents who live on the estate whose interests must come first.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Clearly, the Liberal Democrats' thoughts, like those of everyone in this House, are primarily with the 72 tragic losses of life that occurred at the Grenfell disaster. And I welcome the spirit of cross-party discussion that the Secretary of State and the opposition spokesperson, Member for Hemel Valley, have already set out. And I certainly endorse the points made by the Honourable Member for Kensington and Bayswater in his contribution just now. I welcome many of the recommendations and the actions being taken by the government. In passing, those applied to architects, chartered architects, and I myself have begun the training that is now required of all architects as a result of the Grenfell report, and I declare an interest as a member of the Royal Institute of British Architects. And that brings home in a salutary way the failure of the professions, the failure of successive governments, the failure of industry and the failure of regulation on a tragic and horrendous scale. Buried within the report, or I should say, one of the key recommendations in Sir Martin Morbick's report is set out in typically neutral language of a High Court judge, a request for the government to reconsider whether it is in the public interest for building control functions to be performed by those with a commercial interest. And similar questions were raised on the construction product testing system by Sir Martin Morbick. The white paper refers to the unethical manufacturers are able to exploit systemic weaknesses with appalling consequences. The follow-up Morel Day report on construction product testing highlighted, again, I quote, conflicts of interest and virtually absent enforcement, which are all shocking parts of this tragedy. I would like to ask, my first question to the Secretary of State, therefore, is whether that decision has been taken, because for us, we would go further and say that commercial interests have no place in building control and inspection and have no place in product testing. My second question...
I know this is a very sensitive issue, but the Honourable Member has 2 minutes. It's over by 39 seconds. Timing is everything, so please be quick to your next question.
I will, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much. My second question, therefore, is in relation to those who are excluded from the Building Safety Fund. There are tens of thousands of families who are in buildings under 11 metres or living with products that might last an hour in a fire under PAS 9980. That is the wrong standard. We need all highly flammable materials to be remediated and all buildings to be remediated that are fire safety risks. And I'll ask the Secretary of State to address that question.
State.
I thank him for his questions as well, and his shared commitment, shared clearly across the whole House, that we need to resolve the problems that led to the tragedy at Grenfell Tower. He asked about building control issues, and indeed we set up the independent panel under the chairmanship of Dame Judith Hackett last year. That is looking at decisions that may need to move into the public sector, and she's due to report shortly, so I won't anticipate the findings that we can expect from her panel. He asked as well about the construction products white paper. Well, that's been published today. I hope he will take the opportunity to have a look at that and consider what it includes, and then I'm sure he'll let me or the Minister know what his thoughts are on following on from that. And in terms of remediation for buildings below 11 metres, it's important that we prioritise buildings based on safety risk, and that's what we're doing. We will, of course, keep that under review, and there is a commitment to fund by exception those buildings below 11 metres where the risk is assessed to be high.
Shalami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, in 109 days on the 14th of June, the community and many of us will come together to remember the 72 people who tragically lost their lives. And almost 9 years on, to see the government accepting the 58 recommendations is an acceptance that the tragedy at Grenfell should not have happened. That tragedy was born out of systematic failure. And I stand here today wearing my green heart to recognise the fact that the community had to come together in the aftermath of that fire, because that fire happened because no one listened to them, no one believed them. So I commend them for their campaign and their ongoing campaign to get full justice, including criminal justice. Yeah. And I just wanted to ask the Secretary of State, and I do thank him for this statement this afternoon, and one of the things we heard in our select committee when we had the Grenfell community before us was around the valid concerns which my honourable friend, the member for Kensington and Bayswater, highlighted in terms of a national oversight mechanism, because it cannot be right that the government will mark its own work on that. They want full transparency. I also thank the Secretary of State for outlining that the government will lay papers with regards to spending authority for the memorial. It is really important, if we are really to allow the community to have a lasting and fitting tribute, that this memorial is built with them and designed with them and working with the Memorial Commission. And most importantly, can the Secretary of State outline that the funding for this has been ring-fenced and there will be no issues when this funding for that memorial is discussed?
State.
I thank the chair of the Select Committee for her question and indeed her comments. She raises perhaps the most important point in all this, which is that no one listened to the voices of the people living in Grenfell Tower when they raised their own concerns. And that must never happen again. And it is why the government is seeking to strengthen the voice of tenants living in social housing. AWAB's law is one example of the way that that has been achieved, and it's gratifying that that too has been done with cross-party consensus and cross-party support. Regarding the memorial, my honourable friend, the Minister for Fire Safety, will be introducing the legislation in this House later this afternoon, and we then expect it to proceed at speed through both houses so that it can support the Commission and the community into funding and securing the lasting memorial that needs to be placed to remind all of us forevermore what went wrong and why it can never happen again.
Sir Julian Lewis.
It's very surprising to those of us who are not experts on this matter to hear the Secretary of State saying that the police are undertaking such a vast and complex investigation when the circumstances around this uniquely terrible tragedy do not seem terribly complicated at all. Why is this police inquiry taking so long? And can he at least assure the House and the country at large that there is a dedicated unit within the police that is determined to bring this matter before the courts?
Secretary of State.
Yeah, thank you for his question. In fact, it's an incredibly complex set of circumstances that the police are investigating, and that is why we have one of the biggest teams in the Met's history focused on getting to the bottom of this, and if there is need to pursue any prosecutions that would follow. But it is one of the biggest and most complex police investigations that's ever happened, and that's quite right, because we need to follow culpability and find those who were responsible and bring them to justice, because the victims of what happened deserve that justice, but so do the survivors and the relatives, so they can finally, at long last, have some closure on the tragedies that affected their lives. But we are making sure the government is providing the Met with the resources that they require to fund the size of teams necessary to deliver that justice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I pass Grenfell on my way home every evening, and I see the green heart move lower and lower and lower down as the building becomes dismantled. And I wonder, when that goes, what then happens? And I think about the survivors, I think about the families, I think about the 72 lives lost. And I wonder, and thank you, Secretary of State, for your statement today, but the police, 9 years, and nobody has been arrested. Somebody should already been arrested. My honourable friend from Kensington and Bayswater, we are often told about some people who should already be arrested. And I do think that the police need to at least arrest somebody and begin the process so that the community can begin to heal. Will the Minister please just clarify that he will push the Met to move quicker, faster. Thank you.
I thank her for her question, and it is very emotional to see the tower coming down slowly, brick by brick, but important for the community and all who are concerned about what happened to know that the Memorial Commission is working with the community to secure a design for the memorial that will be a lasting testament to what happened on that fateful night, and to honour the memory of those who lost their lives and those who lost their loved ones. She's quite right, of course. 9 years is a painfully long time to wait for justice. It's important that in such a complex investigation the police are given the time and resources they need to properly investigate, but of course we will be encouraging them to do that work as quickly as they reasonably can be expected to do it, and we all expect them to bring to justice those who bear culpability for the deaths on that night.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement? Can I welcome the funding he's announced to support the Memorial Commission? We have a shortage of skilled builders, plumbers, electricians and other construction workers in this country. Is he confident that we have a sufficiently trained workforce to meet the requirements of his statement, to carry out all those remedial works in the timescale he's outlined? And if not, what additional steps can the government take to ensure that they are completed on time?
Secretary of State.
Yeah.
No, he's quite right to point to that as a concern. It's one that we all share, but it's why in the most recent budget the Chancellor announced £600 million to fund skills and training in the construction sector, so that we can make sure we have the skills available, not just to carry out the work on the Grenfell site and remediation work on other sites affected by unsafe cladding, but make sure that we can build all the homes to the higher safety standards that will now be required right across the country.
Uma Kimura.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The tragedy at Grenfell exposed the scale and devastating consequence of the building safety crisis in this country. We've heard today that survivors and family are still waiting for truth and justice. Sadly, the building safety crisis is still unfolding. In my constituency, as we neared Christmas, over 350 households at Stratford Halo were forced to leave their homes because of serious structural safety concerns with the building. At the time, they were told to leave immediately and they didn't know when they can return. This was terrifying for them. Can the Minister update the House on what the construction reform white paper will do to strengthen standards for building safe and secure homes, so that residents like mine in Stratford Halo never again have to be evacuated from their homes because their buildings are too unsafe to live in, and ensure that developers are held to account?
Yeah. I thank her for her question, and I'm aware of what happened in her constituency recently, and how worrying that has been, not just for the people who were living there, but right across the country, because just like what happened at Grenfell, it attests to the fact that building safety regulations in this country and the building safety system were inadequate to meet the expectations that the public quite rightly have, that their homes should be safe. Now, we've published the Construction Products Reform White Paper today. I hope she will take the opportunity to have a look at that. It outlines some of the changes that we will be looking to make to the products themselves, but there are other aspects of building safety that we will also continue to work on. The independent panel on building control, chaired by Dame Judith Hackett, is due to report shortly, and that will make further important proposals for how we can improve the system.
Hesty Blackman.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nothing can ever undo the harm that was caused, and I was in Parliament that day swearing in when we saw unfolding everything that had occurred. In my constituency, in my city of Aberdeen, we had Piper Alpha in 1988. Nobody can ever get over that tragedy, but as a result, we had the Cullen inquiry and the safety case that came out of it, that meant that we've got a much safer North Sea, which brought some solace to people that this tragedy could never happen again. I thank the Minister for the statement, and I wonder if he would help and join me in urging stakeholders in Scotland to respond to the Scottish Government's consultation on fire safety guidance as we update the Scottish building standards to ensure that our fire safety guidance is as good as possible and that all of those working in that area can comply with the guidance as well as they can.
Yeah, I thank her for her question, and of course I'm happy to support her call for all affected stakeholders, everyone who has an interest, to feed in their views to that inquiry, whether it's in Scotland, in England, Wales, in Northern Ireland, wherever in the United Kingdom it might be. The legacy of the Grenfell tragedy and indeed others, and she referred to one herself, part of that legacy should be greater safety from fire for everybody moving forwards.
Marsha Di Cordova.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement today, and can I say how I'm pleased that the Government are on target to implement the inquiry's recommendations. Nearly 9 years on from that awful tragedy, the families and survivors need truth and they need justice. Now, leaseholders in Battersea have been facing astronomically high service charges and also for costs for fire safety remediation works. And in one particular case, in their building, which is under 11 metres, individual leaseholders are expected to pay approximately £8,000 a week for waking watch. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know that that is just shocking and unacceptable. So can the Secretary of State set out what support and protections are in place for leaseholders? I believe that their case is an exceptional circumstance. So will he also agree to meet with me and leaseholders to see if we can find a resolution?
I thank her for her question, and I would be happy to arrange for a meeting with her, with the Fire Safety Minister, so I can discuss her concerns in detail. But she's quite right to point to the very severe concerns about leasehold charges. That's why the government published a consultation last year on the costs for major works and other costs that fall on leaseholders, and we're due to publish our findings and response to that consultation later this year.
That is the end of that statement. I'll give the front benches a few moments to shuffle over.